There is a moment in every person's life where they realize that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the most powerful one. You've seen it before, the man who slams his fist on the table, demanding respect, the woman who raises her voice just to be heard, the one who brags about everything they've accomplished, hoping someone will finally look at them the way they've always wanted to be seen. And yet none of them command the room. Not really, because real power, the kind that makes people lean in when you speak, the kind that makes enemies nervous and allies loyal, doesn't announce itself. It moves, quietly, deliberately, and always with purpose. Today we are going to talk about something that most people are afraid to understand. Not because it is evil, but because it requires a level of self-awareness and discipline that most people simply are not willing to develop. We are going to talk about how to move like a snake. Now, when I say move like a snake, I am not talking about betraying people or being dishonest or hurting the ones who trust you. That is the shallow interpretation. That is what someone thinks when they haven't studied the deeper layers of this philosophy. What I am really talking about is something far more sophisticated. I am talking about becoming a person who observes more than they react, who positions themselves wisely before they strike, who never reveals their full hand, their full emotion, or their full intention until the moment is exactly right. The snake does not chase its prey. It waits. It reads the environment. It understands the terrain better than anything else in it. And when the moment arrives, it moves with a precision that leaves no room for failure. That is the kind of person we are building today. Not a predator in the cruel sense, but a strategist in the most ancient and refined sense of the word. Niccolo Machiavelli, one of the most misunderstood and most brilliant minds in all of human history, once wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." He understood that the world is not a place where pure strength alone wins. Intelligence must accompany power, and patience must accompany intelligence. Today you are going to learn how to become the fox. Let us begin with the first principle. And that principle is this: you must learn to be invisible before you become seen. This sounds contradictory at first. How can you become powerful if no one notices you? But think about what I just said more carefully. I said invisible before you become seen, not invisible forever. There is a critical difference between someone who is ignored and someone who chooses not to be noticed yet. One is powerless, the other is dangerous. In ancient China, there was a strategic concept called Wu Wei, which loosely translates to acting through non-action. It was the idea that sometimes the most powerful move is to simply do nothing, while everyone else exhausts themselves. While everyone else is fighting for attention, positioning themselves, talking over each other, the one who observes quietly is gathering something far more valuable than attention. They are gathering information, they are reading the room, they are learning what everyone wants, what everyone fears, and what everyone is pretending to be. Think about the last time you walked into a room full of people you didn't know well. Most people within the first few minutes are already performing. They are projecting confidence they may or may not feel. They are laughing louder than necessary. They are name-dropping, peacocking, talking about themselves. Why? Because silence makes them uncomfortable. Because they are afraid that if they are not constantly visible, they will be forgotten or dismissed. The snake doesn't have that fear. The snake understands that the one who speaks first reveals first. And the one who reveals first is already at a disadvantage. So in any new environment, your first move is not to introduce yourself with energy. Your first move is to listen, to observe, to let the room show itself to you before you show yourself to the room. Here is a practical example. Imagine you just started a new job. There is a group of co-workers who already have their social hierarchy established. There is the dominant personality who leads conversations. There is the clown who makes everyone laugh. There is the gossip who knows everything about everyone. Most new people make the mistake of immediately trying to insert themselves into one of these roles. They try too hard, too fast, and they end up being quietly judged for it. The snake does something different. The snake comes in, speaks when spoken to, smiles genuinely but does not overshare, observes who has real influence versus who is just loud, and spends the first few weeks simply learning the terrain. And then, when they do speak up with something meaningful, when they do show a flash of their real personality or intelligence, it lands with far more weight than anything they could have said on day one, because now the room is curious about them, and curiosity is a far more powerful position than familiarity. The second principle. Emotion is a weapon, but only if you control who holds it. Most people leak their emotions constantly. Not because they are weak, but because no one ever taught them that emotional expression is a form of communication that can be used strategically. Every time you show frustration, you tell people what irritates you. Every time you light up with excitement, you show people what you value. Every time you go cold or withdrawn, you reveal your pressure points. Robert Greene, in his landmark work, The 48 Laws of Power, describes the power of the cold game. He talks about how certain historical figures, politicians, generals, and negotiators would train themselves to become unreadable in high-stakes moments. Not because they felt nothing, but because they understood that showing emotion in those moments was like handing your opponent the rule book to defeating you. Think about how this plays out in relationships. Imagine two people in a disagreement. One of them is visibly upset, voice rising, hands moving, energy pouring out of them. The other one is completely still. Not cold, not robotic, just still, calm, present. That second person does not even have to say anything particularly profound. The stillness alone changes the dynamic, because emotionally the room gravitates toward the calmer energy, and the person who is visibly dysregulated starts to feel self-conscious, even a little embarrassed, about the gap between their reaction and the other person's composure. That composure is the snake's most dangerous quality. Not anger, not aggression, stillness. Now I want to be careful here, because there is a version of this that becomes unhealthy and even manipulative in a harmful way. Being emotionally unavailable as a personality trait is not the same thing as strategic composure in high-stakes situations. One is a coping mechanism. The other is a conscious discipline. What we are building is the second thing. The ability to feel everything but choose what you show and when you show it. The samurai had a concept called haijoshin. It means ordinary mind or constant mind. It referred to the mental state of being equally present and calm, whether you were eating breakfast or walking into a sword fight. The idea was that a mind that only becomes sharp under pressure is a mind that can be destabilized by pressure. But a mind trained to remain level in all conditions is a mind that cannot be rattled when it counts the most. Practice this. The next time someone says something that irritates you before you respond, take one slow breath, not to suppress what you feel, but to create 1 second of space between the stimulus and your reaction. That 1 second is where your power lives. That 1 second is the difference between responding and reacting. A reaction is theirs, a response is yours. Now we arrive at the third principle, and this one is perhaps the most advanced. It is the principle of strategic withdrawal. Most people believe that staying present, staying engaged, staying visible is always the correct move, and in surface-level social dynamics that appears to be true. The one who shows up more seems more invested. The one who responds quickly seems more interested. The one who is always there seems more reliable. But there is a hidden cost to constant presence, and that cost is perceived value. When something is always available, it becomes ordinary. When something disappears, even briefly, it becomes desired. This is not manipulation for the sake of cruelty. This is a fundamental law of human psychology. We want what we cannot easily have. We appreciate what we could potentially lose. The snake understands disappearance. It knows when to vanish into the grass, not because it has been defeated, but because it is repositioning. It knows that sometimes the most powerful move is to remove yourself from a situation entirely and let the silence do the work that words never could. There is a story, perhaps apocryphal, perhaps not, about a chess grandmaster named Tigran Petrosian. He was known not for his brilliant attacks, but for his suffocating positional play. He would never make a single dramatic move. Instead, he would spend game after game slowly removing his opponent's options, tightening the board like a vice, until his opponent was not checkmated in a sudden flash, but rather slowly suffocated without ever seeing the decisive blow coming. That is the snake in motion, not the dramatic strike, the slow, patient removal of options. When someone disrespects you publicly, the dramatic response is to fire back immediately. The snake's response is to say almost nothing, smile, let it pass, and allow the observers in the room to reach their own conclusions. Then, when the moment is right, and it will come, you address it in a way that is proportional, clear, and undeniable, not with rage, with absolute precision. Machiavelli wrote, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." And while the word deception here is strong, what he really meant was strategy. Don't exhaust yourself fighting on terms that your opponent chose. Change the terrain, reframe the game, win by moving in a direction they didn't anticipate. The fourth principle, information is currency, and the snake never spends more than it earns. One of the most overlooked aspects of social power is this. The person who asks the most questions in a conversation actually controls the conversation. Think about that for a moment. We tend to believe that the person who talks the most, who shares the most, who fills the silence with the most content, is the one leading. But they are actually the one being studied. The one asking thoughtful questions is the one receiving data. And data in any social environment is power. Here is how this looks in practice. Two people at a dinner party. Person A talks constantly about themselves, their job, their opinions, their experiences, their plans. Person B asks Person A thoughtful questions, listens deeply, remembers details, and only shares selective pieces of their own story. By the end of the evening, Person A believes they have made a deep connection with Person B. They feel understood, seen, valued. Meanwhile, Person B knows everything relevant about Person A, and Person A knows almost nothing about Person B. Who holds the power in that relationship going forward? This is not about being fake or calculating in a sinister way. Some of the warmest, most genuinely connected people in history operated this way. Because when you make someone feel heard and understood, you are giving them a gift. The strategic dimension is simply that you do not give away the same gift for free. You protect your own interior world until you are sure it is safe to share it. Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." The snake's intelligence gathering is not born from paranoia. It is born from the understanding that knowledge of the terrain, including the human terrain around you, is the foundation of any lasting advantage. But there is an even deeper layer to this. It is not just about what you learn from others. It is about how you reveal yourself. The snake is selective, not secretive in a way that feels cold or suspicious, but measured in a way that keeps people perpetually curious. When someone cannot fully read you, they remain engaged. They lean in. They want to understand you. That wanting keeps you at the center of their mental world, which is exactly where the snake wants to be. Fifth principle. Master the art of the slow yes and the invisible no. Most people are terrible at boundaries. Not because they don't know where their limits are, but because they have been socially conditioned to believe that saying no is a form of rejection, or worse, a form of weakness. So they say yes to everything. They overcommit. They spread themselves thin. They show up to things they don't care about, for people who don't truly value them, because they are afraid of what declining will cost them socially. The snake never makes this mistake. The snake understands that your time, your energy, and your presence are resources. And like any resource, they have value precisely because they are limited. The moment you treat them as infinite, so does everyone else. There is a kind of invisible suffering that comes with being too available. You start to notice that the people you always show up for don't show up the same way for you. Not because they are bad people necessarily, but because you have trained them to expect your presence without reciprocating its worth. You made yourself ordinary to them, and ordinary things are not protected, they are consumed. The snake withdraws not to punish, but to preserve. It says no, not with hostility, but with a calm certainty that communicates something deeper than the word itself. It communicates self-respect. And self-respect is one of the most magnetic qualities a human being can possess, because it is also one of the rarest. Here is a practical framework. The next time you are asked to do something, before you answer, ask yourself 3 questions. Does this align with where I am trying to go? Does this person genuinely value what I am giving? And if I said yes every time this was asked of me, would I still be someone I respect? If the answer to any of those questions is no, then your answer should be no. Not with guilt, not with a long explanation, just a calm, warm, unhurried decline. I appreciate the thought, but I'm not going to be able to do that. Full stop. No apology, no detailed excuse, just clarity. Powerful people don't over-explain their no-cas, because over-explaining is a form of seeking approval. And the snake does not seek approval, it seeks alignment. Sixth principle. Let your reputation precede you, and protect it like your life depends on it. There is a reason why certain people walk into a room and the entire atmosphere shifts. Not because of what they are doing in that moment, but because of what people know and have heard about them. Their reputation travels before them, and that reputation over time becomes a kind of invisible armor and an invisible weapon at the same time. Machiavelli understood this so deeply. He wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." And while that quote has been taken out of context endlessly, what he really meant was this: if people love you but do not respect the weight of your word, they will take liberties with you. But if people understand that you mean what you say, that you follow through on your intentions, whether those intentions are generous or fierce, then your word becomes a kind of gravitational force. The snake builds this kind of reputation slowly. not through grand gestures or explosive moments, through consistency, through following through on small things, through being exactly who it says it is, in ways that are quiet but undeniable. If you say you are going to do something, you do it, every time, without exception. Because every time you follow through, you are making a deposit into an account of trust and respect that will pay dividends for years. And on the other side, if you ever promise something and don't deliver it, if you ever present yourself as one thing and behave as another, the damage to your reputation is not proportional to the action, it is disproportionate. Because people don't just update their view of that one behavior, they reinterpret everything that came before it. They say, I knew something was off, and now every good thing you did becomes suspicious. This is why the snake is patient with its reputation. It does not rush to impress. It does not exaggerate its accomplishments. It does not speak in superlatives about what it is going to do someday. It simply does things, quietly, consistently, and lets the record speak. As Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That is the snake's operating code. Know who you are. Behave as that person in every circumstance. Let the world catch up to the truth of you over time. Seventh principle. The power of silence in a world that cannot stop talking. We live in an age of noise. Everyone has a platform. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone feels compelled to respond, react, post, comment, argue, correct, and announce themselves constantly. And in that environment, silence has become one of the rarest and most powerful things a person can offer. The snake knows this. The snake uses silence the way a painter uses negative space. Not as emptiness, but as contrast. That makes everything else more vivid. When everyone around you is speaking, your silence makes you magnetic. When everyone around you is reacting, your stillness makes you formidable. When someone expects you to be defensive or emotional, and instead you simply look at them with calm attention, you have already won something they don't even realize they've given you. There is a technique that negotiators use called the strategic pause. After a counterpart finishes speaking, instead of responding immediately, the negotiator simply waits, holds eye contact, says nothing. Most people cannot tolerate that silence for more than a few seconds, and in their discomfort, they start filling the space. They start softening their position. They start revealing more than they intended to. All because you refuse to be rushed. That same principle applies in everyday life. In arguments, in interviews, in negotiations, in any moment where the pressure is on you to respond. The snake does not rush to fill the silence. It lets the silence breathe. It lets the other person sit in their own discomfort. And when it does speak, every word is intentional, because it did not waste a single one before it was ready. Oscar Wilde once said, I have nothing to declare except my genius. And while that is a brilliant piece of wit, the deeper irony is that he declared it. The truly powerful do not declare. They demonstrate. There is a kind of person who has accomplished a great deal, who has walked difficult roads and come out the other side, who sits in a room and says almost nothing, and yet everyone in the room somehow knows. That is the snake at its finest. Not performing power, radiating it. Eighth principle. Position yourself where you can see, but where you cannot easily be seen. This principle comes directly from the ancient battlefield, but it applies with equal force to the social and professional environments we navigate today. In war, the army that controls the high ground controls the battle. In conversation, the person who understands the full picture of the situation, while revealing only what they choose, controls the interaction. What does this look like in practice? It means never playing all your cards at once. It means always maintaining strategic options that others don't know you have. It means building relationships with people in multiple different circles so that you always have perspective that others lack. It means doing your research before every important conversation so that you walk in knowing more than you are expected to know. Think of it like this. Two people walk into the same negotiation. One of them knows only their own needs and goals. The other has spent time understanding what the other side wants, what they fear, what alternatives they have, and what outcome would feel like a win to them. Who has the advantage? Obviously the second person. Not because they are smarter necessarily, but because they cared enough to prepare. They positioned themselves before the battle began. The snake is always positioning. When it appears to be resting, it is reading the terrain. When it appears to be absent, it is observing from a distance. It is never simply reacting to the situation as it finds it. It is always thinking about what comes next, and what the space between here and there looks like. Teddy Roosevelt famously said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." What most people focus on is the big stick. The power, the force. But the more important part of that quote is speak softly, because the soft voice communicates something that the loud voice cannot. It communicates that you don't need to raise your voice to be heard, that you trust your own authority, that you are not performing strength, you are it. Ninth principle, the long game versus the short game. This may be the most important distinction in this entire teaching, and it is the one that separates those who flirt with social intelligence from those who truly embody it. The difference between the short game and the long game is the difference between satisfaction and legacy, between impulse and wisdom. The short game says, I want to win this argument right now. The long game says, I want this person to ultimately respect me. The short game says, I am going to react to this disrespect so everyone can see I'm not to be messed with. The long game says, I am going to respond in a way that reveals my character and makes them question theirs. One of the most painful lessons that any person who has tried to live with strategic intelligence will tell you is that there will be moments where you could strike and you choose not to, where you could defend yourself publicly and you choose to remain quiet, where you could expose someone and you choose to let the universe handle it. And in those moments it feels like losing. It looks like losing to everyone watching. But the snake knows what the impatient person cannot understand in that moment. Time is an ally, and the one who moves on good timing rather than emotion will almost always have the better outcome. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in human history and one of the most internally disciplined, wrote in his private journals, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." He was not writing those words as a public display of wisdom. He was writing them to himself, as a reminder, because even he, Emperor of Rome, had to constantly remind himself not to react, not to let the short game override the long one. The snake that strikes at the wrong moment does not just miss. It reveals itself. It shows where it is, what it values, and what it is willing to risk. And that information is now in the hands of every predator in the area. The snake that waits, that conserves its venom, that moves only when the moment is certain, that snake does not just win once. It survives to win again and again. 10th principle. Become someone that people want to believe in. Everything we have talked about today, the stillness, the silence, the patience, the strategy, all of it would be hollow without this, without the inner substance that makes a person genuinely worth following, genuinely worth trusting, genuinely worth fearing in the right ways. Because the deepest form of power is not the power that is taken, it is the power that is given freely by people who believe in you. Think about the great leaders of history, the ones who endured, not just the conquerors, but the builders. The ones whose names are still spoken centuries after their death. What made them different? Yes, they were strategic. Yes, they were patient. Yes, they moved wisely and positioned themselves cleverly. But underneath all of that was something that strategy alone cannot manufacture. Character, vision, the capacity to make other people feel that following them was not a sacrifice, but an elevation. Machiavelli, in one of his less quoted but equally profound observations, wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." The snake does not just use people. The truly powerful snake, the one that builds something lasting, cultivates people. It recognizes talent, it rewards loyalty, it creates an environment where those around it grow, and in growing they grow the empire. Because at the end of the day, a lone snake, however brilliant, is still a single point of failure. But a vision shared by people who have been moved by your character and earned your respect, that becomes something that cannot be stopped by any single adversary. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, and when he walked out, he did not emerge with bitterness that destroyed everything he touched. He emerged with a moral authority so profound that even his enemies struggled to argue against him. That is the long game made human. That is what it looks like when a person has so thoroughly mastered their interior world that the exterior world bends around them. You are building something. Whatever it is you are working on right now, whatever room you are trying to move in, whatever goal sits at the end of this road you are walking, the principles we have talked about today are not just tactics. They are a way of being, a philosophy of presence, a code for people who understand that how you move through the world is ultimately who you become in the world. And so we close with this. The snake does not apologize for its nature. It does not perform softness it does not feel, nor does it perform hardness it does not need. It is simply, completely and precisely itself, in every environment, on every terrain, with every kind of creature it encounters. You have been given tools today, not weapons, tools. The difference is in the hand that holds them and the intention behind their use. These principles, used with genuine integrity and a long-term vision rooted in something meaningful, will make you a person of rare and quiet power. But if used carelessly, purely for domination, purely for control, purely for the satisfaction of winning small games, they will hollow you out from the inside until there is nothing left but a strategy without a soul. Machiavelli's great tragedy, some scholars argue, was that he was so gifted at describing how power worked that he never quite answered the deeper question of what it was for. Don't make that mistake. Know your why. Ground your strategy in a purpose that is larger than your ego, and then move. Quietly, deliberately, precisely, like the snake. If this moved something in you today, if you heard something here that you needed to hear, if you walked away from this with a different understanding of yourself and how you want to show up in this world, then do me one simple favor. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos like this in the future. There is so much more to explore, and we are only just beginning.